Today, I have the privilege of welcoming someone who has shaped personal finance in Canada for more than 3 decades now, Dave Chilton. He's the author of The Wealthy Barber, one of the best-selling books of all time, and former investor on Dragon's Den, where he became known for his thoughtful, practical approach to money and entrepreneurship. David has just released a fully rewritten edition of The Wealthy Barber, which I have here behind me, updated for today's realities, which are higher living costs, longer retirements, changing investment markets, and the behavioral challenges that still trip up so many Canadians today. It's written in classic David style, which is simple, funny, and filled with advice that actually sticks. But before we jump into it, I want to share two quick stories that his sister Susan shared with me here. So, growing up, and David doesn't know I have this information, but growing up, their grandmother White, who lived with dementia, was completely convinced that David was Jack Abbott from The Young and the Restless. So their family still laughs about that today. Susan also remembers David was really good at solving Rubik's Cube at lightning speed when he was a kid. Something that obviously drove her crazy, but also amazed his parents. And looking back, it hints at the focus and curiosity that would define his career. So, David, it's an honor to have you on our podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. And I know that you don't do a lot of interviews. You tend to handle these solo, so I'm honored. My sister wasn't kidding about the Jack Abbott story, by the way. My grandmother, her last 6 to 8 months of living, thought I was Jack Abbott from The Young and the Restless. Every time I would go, she would ask me about Nicky Newman, what was going on at business. Her questions made perfect sense if I'd been Jack Abbott. Because I watched The Young and the Restless at that point, I was very young. I was 18, 19. I played along and gave her reasonably good answers, and everybody was happy.
That's phenomenal. So let's jump into The Wealthy Barber. The first edition, written back in 1989, so a few years back now. Obviously, things have changed, but what prompted you to kind of revisit and rewrite it now? And how did you approach the update?
You know, it's interesting. I people think I'm kidding when I'm saying this, but my age played a bit of a role. I mean, I'm old. And I realized if I didn't do the rewrite soon, it wasn't going to be very good. And so I thought I'd better get at it. And then the big reason is the things you alluded to in the introduction. I mean, it's tough out there for people in their 20s, 30s, early 40s. You've got a high real estate costs, high cost of living in general. There's more products. It's more confusing. What route do you take? TFSA versus RRSP, all those types of things. Very few people can do it all. So how do you prioritize? What are the nuances? And then social media and all the algorithms have made it harder than ever to resist all the temptations out there. So I thought there was a lot of reasons to come back. Then the writing process was interesting. I thought because it was an update, it would take 4 to 6 months. It took me 16 months full time. Now I have a very unusual writing process. I test everything and I'm giving it out to people in the target audience, garnering their feedback, making the adjustments, doing the rewrites, getting the editors involved. It's a very time consuming process, but I'm hoping that's what leads to a product that people end up embracing. But I did not see it taking this long. But as you know, you're in the industry, like even the RSP versus TFSA argument, there's a lot of nuances there. There's a lot of things people have to consider. Making those understandable. I didn't want it to be intimidating, overwhelming, boring. The worst thing you can do nowadays is bore the reader because they want to be entertained. They want that instant gratification on the entertainment front. So it took a lot of reworking, but I'm really pleased with the end result. So far, the feedback's been great. The target audience seems to be loving it. And ironically, I think all of the info out there on TikTok and on Instagram, the short videos that you see out there have helped me because it's overwhelming to people. There's a bit of a paradox of choice setting in. They don't know what to do. There's a paralysis. Now they're saying, hey, I can read an entertaining book. This guy's been around a long time. Let's go through it that way. And so I thought that would hurt me, but it's actually played to my advantage, frankly, and the book's advantage.
Yeah, like I said in the intro, like the way that you obviously wrote the original, but also the updated version, the way it's written is so easy to read. And I said I did a review a couple weeks ago of the book. I read it on vacation. Thank you for sending me an early copy there. Sit on the beach. I read it in a day, and like I'm not a huge book reader. At the end of the day, it's just not my thing. It's just such an easy read, but it's educational, right? And finance can be really dry, right? It's hard to kind of make what we talk about sexy in a way, but you do a great job of it. And yeah, easy to read, easy to take in, easy to learn, right? Like it's easy to take a little bit of every chapter away and okay, I can implement that in my daily life, right?
No, thank you. I'm glad you said all that. So that's an honor for you to say that because again, all the work that goes into giving it the flow and you're building as you go so people understand something and they're almost taking it in more through osmosis. I don't want people memorizing it or making copious notes. I want them kind of reading the story as they would a novel and it kind of all makes sense and therefore they're more likely to remember it. It's more likely to stick. And I think having multiple characters is crucial because I can
Yeah.
cover off so many scenarios and you can get them going back and forth for a little humor and a little interaction on other fronts. I added a character, two characters really. I added a character, a new Canadian to this version, but also the narrator's wife, who's never seen in the barbershop, plays a very prominent role. In fact, I've had three different people say that she is their favorite character in the book, and she never actually
Funny, hey?
speaks in the book. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting the way it played out.
Well, I like, and again, I put in the book review, but I like how you had like, yeah, Roy, who everyone looks up to, also had a mentor, Mr. White,
Right.
right?
That's
Like
right.
even the mentor has a mentor, and I think
That's very
sometimes we
true.
get to a point in life. It's like, okay, I'm now the mentor. It's like, no, you also still you need to be a mentee always as well. Always have someone to look up to. Which I'm the type that grasp that. I kind of I'm hitting that point in my career. I'm like, yeah, I need to mentor the younger generation, but I can't forget to also have a mentor. And so, for people listening, a lot of our viewership here on our channel are retirees or people close to.
That's right.
But you need to still have that older generation to look up to and learn from, good or bad, right? A lot of your parents are sitting with large RSPs. Like, learn from this kind of stuff. So, as we've talked about, lots of change, obviously, since the first book came out. But let's maybe highlight what hasn't changed. Like, what's the same as 1989?
That's a great question. I haven't been asked that much because people have been focusing on the changes. I mean, the timeless principle of pay yourself first is still extremely effective. In fact, it's interesting after doing this for 36 years, seeing so many people's financial plans, budgets, spending summaries. I'm more into pay yourself first now than I was when I penned the book 37, 38
Yeah.
years ago. I mean, it's a very effective approach. Get the money off the top of the paycheck before you have an opportunity to blow it. A lot of the saving ideas are similar to what they were 30 and 40 years ago on all fronts. The problem is it's tougher now. I mentioned the
Mhm.
algorithms, ubiquitously available credit, the fact you can just tap your credit card everywhere. All of this makes it easy to give into temptation. I think that chapter took a tremendous amount of time to write. I took a lot of the conventional wisdom, things you may have heard before, but tried to give the whys behind it and some of the nuances at how best to apply it or why it may not work in certain circumstances with a lot of bouncing back and forth. And that chapter really seems to be resonating with people. That's the only chapter, interestingly, in the three books I've written. So the original Wealthy Barber, the Wealthy Barber Returns, and now the full update, that when I tested it, I did almost no changes, no changes. Like people said, I like that. I like the flow. And so that one made it its way as in. But the timeless principles have worked out very well. And I think for people who invest in long-term growth, set aside some money every month, dollar cost average, et cetera, stay detached, don't panic during the tough times. All of those principles have stayed the same. But where do you put it? In the old days, there was just the RSP. Now there's the
Yeah.
TFSA. For young eligible people, there's the FHSA, which of course can be marvelous. And you tend not to go with equity funds in that particular fund because you're looking at such a short-term time horizon. So again, how do you cover off all these nuances? That's the challenge of writing a book like this.
Yeah. And hence your comment again and again. Like, I love to see the retired barber, but it would be impossible to write a book like that because there's just, it's an ox, there's just too many avenues to go down at that point.
You know, you are 100% right. You and I talked off air about this when you came on the Wealthy Barber podcast. I'm asked a lot, why don't you do the retired barber? But this book is kind of prescriptive in a way. It does cover off a lot of past and nuances,
Mhm.
but everybody's so different by the time they're 55 and 60. Do they have pension involvement? What about their spouse? All the different sources of income, their tax situation, their desires. Oh, there's so many moving parts. They need customized advice. You could do a book using a lot of humor, looking at all the things they need to think about and covering off
Yeah.
the different angles that they need to attack these subjects from. And so they're in a better position to learn from the financial advisor who's also very competent. You want people walking in who are somewhat well informed, but I probably wouldn't use the novel format for that. I would use a short chapter type of format, using a fair amount of humor, keeping it again less intimidating, but again, a different style of delivery. But I don't think
Yeah.
I would ever do that because I find writing really hard and I'm 64. And I don't know if
Yeah.
I want to give up another year and a half. Who knows how many healthy years I have left. So I think my book days are probably behind me, truthfully.
Yeah, well, hey, you got quite the trail behind you with these ones. So, when we're looking at the fundamentals, so for someone that's kind of done the fundamentals, save that 10%, gotten to the point, say they've saved reasonably, but face inflation, housing costs, tax changes. What are the key things they should focus on? Because this isn't just the kind of 20 to 45-year-old market that the book really gears into, but it's for retirees. Like, we talk to people day in, day out that are getting close to retirement from an age perspective, but they don't feel close at all when it comes to being able to actually retire.
Yeah, that's a lot of my friends. And I mean, some of that, by the way, is because psychologically, of course, they're not ready. They don't have
Yeah.
necessarily plans for how to transition to a full life. They don't yet know how to be involved in their community or do those types of things, develop the hobbies. And I know that you end up talking to a lot of your clients about that. Some of the clients tends to be, the research says, a little bit more male than female on this front, really tend to struggle to adjust early. So there's the lifestyle aspects, the psychological aspects, but then financially, a lot of us still grow up with that fear of running out of money. And you made a point in the intro that we're living so darn long. In fact, if you look at married couples, I mean, one of the two, more often than not the female, but not always, tends to live to be very, very old. My father's 93 and he's battling some dementia, but physically, and he's in very strong health. There's no sign that he is going to part at any point in the near future. And so, again, planning around all of that becomes tricky. And so you need individual planning. I mean, I'm serving you here, but I'm not doing it because you and I've come to know each other. There is one time in life you have to get a planner involved for sure. And that's as you're
Yeah.
getting close to retirement, because even on the income front, you've got all these sources of income. It used to be we got an income, most of us, just from our employer. You got a T4.
Yeah.
But now all of a
Yeah.
sudden you've got Canada pension plan decisions, you've got OAS, you may have a private pension at work, you've got your RSP, you've got your TFSA. There's so many different sources of income. You may have some rental income by then. You've got non-registered accounts. How do you access this in the optimal way from a tax perspective? And wow, what a difference it makes. So without changing your risk profile, if you handle all this well, it can literally make the difference of tens of thousands of dollars. In fact, I'm sure in your case, you've seen some where doing it wrong versus doing it right is hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Millions.
Yes. And
Yeah,
again,
we
we're
have
trying
ones
to
like
tell
13
people,
million. Yeah.
yeah, and that's not from changing your risk profile. It's not even changing your investment mix necessarily. It's changing your approach to when and where you gain access to the money. So you need customized
Exactly.
advice. Most of the people in the field are now using advanced software. I was joking with you off air when we dealt it with each other a couple months ago. I've only done that once to a very thorough level where I helped the person to the full level. And I was using old-fashioned Bristol board and mapping
Yeah.
out all the different ways it could play out. Crap, it was like 24, 36 hours of work. Like, it's a lot. And so I think the
Yeah.
software obviously is playing a major role now in all of this. It's a weakness in our financial planning field right now, in our investment advisor field, that a lot of clients aren't getting this full service, unfortunately. And I've highlighted that in videos even 2 years ago when we first started out, saying that we need everybody providing this service. The deaccumulation phase, as it's often called, is so important, and people need to be walked through it. But let's be honest, a lot of the advisors aren't quite as excited about the deaccumulation phase as they were
Well,
about the accumulation phase.
yeah, and a lot don't know how to do it. Like that's what we're
Right.
bumping into a lot as well. Is that, I'd say most of our industry, the financial planners out there, are accumulation focused, which
Right.
makes
For
sense,
sure.
right? Like most of them
Absolutely.
get paid from assets, so it's like, yeah, they're
Yep.
focused on accumulation. I've done quite a few videos on it, talking about, when you hit retirement, it may be time to switch advisors, like someone that actually focuses on the decumulation phase. And I think that's starting to become a specialty in a way, where that decumulation, because like you said, you go from one income stream to many. Some are taxable, some are not. Some you start now, some you get benefit to delay. There's a lot of moving parts. And and again, going back to software helps. I've also found sometimes it's not great, because a lot of the larger financial institutions have adopted more AI model software, and it's just automated. So it's like, well,
Right.
you're in bucket 4 of the 5, so we plug you in there, hit a button, here you go. So software speeds it up. I don't know if it's made it any better across the board though, too.
No, yeah, and you're right. The software, even then, the assumptions that are put in, what data is entered in on behalf of the person, asking the right questions of the person is vital. And so it does take a mixture of the software and the human experience. You were mentioning some people are moving from one type of advisor, one advisor to another. What I'm seeing a little bit more of, music to your ears, by the way, is people who are dealing with a traditional advisor, but layering on top of it a fee only financial advisor for that visit to get an all-encompassing plan, including estate planning, insurance plan, et cetera, but also how do I get through the deaccumulation phase in the most prudent
Mhm.
way, in the most optimal way? They're not leaving their other advisor. They're
Yeah.
partnering the two in essence. That's a pattern that you're seeing more and more in Canada, and I think you'll continue to see. And then, of course, over the next 5 to 10 years, AI will play a bigger role in all of this, although it's not there yet. I can tell
It's
you
not
from
there yet.
going on and using ChatGPT, for example, for financial questions, there are still a fair number of mistakes coming back. And some of them, by the way, quite significant and can point people in the
Huge.
wrong direction. And so it is coming. And I'm sure over the
Yeah.
years, it'll improve tremendously and it'll help the best advisors to be even better, but it's not there yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say over half of our clients that we do fee for service plans, they have their advisor. So
Right.
they come to us, it's like, do we have to fire our advisor? It's like, no, we'll build the
Right.
plan. Oh, you've just made their job a lot easier, and you should probably ask them to reduce their fees a bit because we've basically given you the blueprint to move forward with. So
You know, it's also
absolutely.
interesting,
So
just kind of going on about this whole subject. It's you can really see the power of demographics because look at how much more anybody in this field, from the educators like me to the people doing the front line like you, are getting asked about estate planning.
yeah,
So I mean, the last 10 to 15 years, all of a sudden it's become one of the hottest topics. Even when we put out the short videos that we do on Instagram and on Facebook, et cetera, the ones on estate planning are some of the most popular because people want to know about how do you choose the right power of attorney and what subtle nuances should I be watching out for if I'm putting together a trust, et cetera, et cetera. Those all really
yeah,
matter, but they matter more now because not just are we getting older, but at least at the high end, there's a lot of wealth. And the
yeah,
financial
yeah,
plans and estate planning so much more complex than they used to be. Look at all the people with holdcos or corporate money in some form, private company shares, foreign real estate, blended families. These are all very commonplace now versus relatively rare 25 and 30 years ago. So because of these
yeah.
complexities, people are putting a lot more focus on it, which is good news.
And you do a great job. So if you haven't checked out Dave's podcast on YouTube, check out Dave's podcast. It's on YouTube. I'm sure it's Spotify, Apple, wherever
It
you
is,
listen
yeah.
to podcasts. But great. And I know your guest today was talking about wills and talk about estate planning and that kind of stuff. So if you want to learn more about just everything finance, kind of ties into a lot of what we talk about here too. If you haven't checked out Dave's podcast, which I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, make sure to go check that out. So dipping on the behavioral mindset of financial success. What are some of the biggest behavioral traps you see Canadians fall into, especially near retirement? Like, is it the longevity thing? Is it the taking CPP early? Like, what are these kind of psychological issues that are really trapping Canadians?
Well, I mean, taking CPP early, it's one of the most fascinating things that I have bumped into in my 40 years of doing this, in that even with friends, like I'm talking people who know and trust me and know that I tend to be a little fanatical about the details of all this when I explain the math and tell them that in their particular circumstance, not in all, but in their circumstance, the odds greatly favor it makes sense to delay. They will say to me, "Yes, I agree with you. And in fact, I really like the way you taught that, but I'm not going to." Right?
Yeah,
That's the answer.
yeah,
So on again.
yeah.
So
We
Dave,
see it all the time.
yeah,
Oh
you're
yeah,
very sharp. I really like what you taught me here, but that's not what I'm going to do. And you don't see that in the
exactly.
other areas. So there's something about the CPP that really draws that out in people in a very interesting way. And again, there's lots of exceptions that people think they're going to have a shortened lifespan if they need the money, obviously, then that changes everything. But for many people who are in a relatively good financial position and of relatively normal health for their age, delaying it makes tremendous mathematical sense. It really does. And again, a lot
Yeah,
of people say, yeah, but I'm going to need some monies. Well, of course, you're going to work with your advisor to figure out where else you can tap those monies as needed and blend all of this together, as we've said, to try to optimize your tax situation. But also, you think about the CPP, it's inflation hedged. And it takes away a lot of longevity risk. It's never stopping. Those are two huge benefits. And that's one of the reasons why people need to at least be open-minded to taking it
yeah.
later if they're working with their advisor. And right now, I'm finding most people aren't too open-minded.
Very close-minded. Yeah, everyone I talk to, if they're in their early 60s, my first question is, have you taken your CPP yet? And not that I care if you've taken it, but it does
Right.
change the planning things we can do. So,
Well,
yeah, next thing I just want to say is, go ahead.
you were asking me about issues. This isn't so much the crowd that's just getting to retirement. Well, a little bit it is. RRSPs are getting way too much criticism that is just not based on proper math. I can tell you right now, that may be one of my biggest frustrations out there. You've got a lot of people who are getting close to retirement and saying, "Cripe, I'm taking monies out of my RSP, or I'm being told what the tax liability is going to be. I never should have done this in the first place." Yes, you should have. The fact
Yeah,
that you got the deduction up front let you save more in the RSP than you would have in a non-registered vehicle or even a TFSA. And as long as you're dropping down in tax brackets relative to what you contributed at, it's going to end up being a positive. And most people are. Now, you are in a position to tell your own audience this. What percentage of your clients end up in a lower average tax rate in retirement, working along with their spouse, especially, than they did in the years they were contributing to the RSP? It's got to
yeah.
be 70 plus.
99%. No,
99
it's
even.
not. It's
Okay.
I would say 95 to 99%.
And
It's
I
almost
asked not
everybody.
only you, I phoned you a few months ago. We didn't even know each
Mhm.
other that well. And I asked you that. I also reached out to people in your industry and I got the same answer, 90 plus, even with the people who dealt with the extremely affluent. So they had huge RSPs, they came back 60 to 70% plus. So this whole
Yeah.
thing that RSPs are a trap, RSPs not a good idea. People have a fundamental misunderstanding of how the math of RSP works. I really tried to address that in the book. I didn't want to lose people and go so deeply in the weeds that people with no math skills would say, this book's getting boring. I heard it wasn't boring, but it is. So I really reworked that many times to show people there's some people off on that particular front.
Well, and you did a phenomenal job explaining it and actually breaking it down on like, well, if you each invested 5,000, but 5,000 RSP is not 5,000 TFSA. You have,
Right.
and then you talk about without going into the weeds, like the refund, and then you get the refund on the refund, and the refund on the refund on the refund. It goes in infinity and beyond, right?
Well, you can
But
imagine
no, you.
how many times I had to test that.
Oh,
I had to go back over and over again. And then I'm kind of getting away from the book and I'm glad to do that, a little break from it and talking more about what I see later in life. And again, something you've highlighted that some of your colleagues on YouTube have done a very good job of highlighting too. For some reason, a lot of people go into retirement and when they're doing their planning, their income planning, they forget they're still going to have lump sum expenditures, lump sum obligations at some point down the road. In fact, I would say probably you'd know be better, but I would say 50 to 60% of people make that mistake. They don't think
Oh,
about we're still going to need a
I'd say
car
more
10
than
years
that.
from now. Yeah, maybe even more than that. And that
Yeah.
actually really affects your planning because where you end up having to gain access to that money if you haven't planned can really hurt you on the tax front again. So I think that we're finally shining a light on a lot of these common mistakes that pre-retirees and retirees are making. It's one thing, it'd be interesting. I think somebody could have a nice business right now, not selling any product, just doing seminars for
Yeah.
pre-retirees and saying, we're not selling products. And guess what? We're also not giving you any advice. What we're showing you is the things you need to think about. So you're in a better position to work with your advisor, to ask the right questions, to understand her advice, understand his advice, whatever. I think that could be a nice business for somebody and a lot of fun.
Well, that's how we view our YouTube channel.
Right.
It's seminars. Watch it as you wish. We're not here to sell you anything really. Like if you need help, we obviously tell people we can help you, but it's really and I know a lot of advisors watch our channel to get tips on how to serve their clients better too. So, it's kind of the modern day, seminar webinar.
It is. No, I think that's very fair. It's interesting looking at all this. I find when you're dealing with a lot of people, let's go to the 70-year-old, for example. One of the big challenges is a lot of them have friends who've ended up spending less in retirement by a significant amount than they thought they would. In fact, you saw some US data recently on that from a well-researched paper. So they think I should be spending even more. I'll go to a higher withdrawal rate, whatever. But the flip side of that makes it so tricky is those who live fairly long can get into the assisted living position or having to have people come into the house, et cetera. And those expenses have risen at a much faster than CPI rate. And putting all of
Yeah.
this together and handling that risk and trying to strike the right balances, it's fairly tricky.
It is. And that's people always ask, do we build our home into the plan? And I say, you know what, typically we like to just leave that there because if you need to go to a care home or get care facility in it, there's an asset there to kind of lean on to, right? So it's kind of a buffer. For those that rent their retirement though, it's a totally different plan. And that's why everyone's plan is so unique. So yeah, it's a lot of moving parts in retirement. Going back to your book, I want to focus on that today because it's about you, Dave. So humor and storytelling obviously are a huge gift to you. And this is more of a comment and a praise saying, again, the way you've written it, how easy it is to read, understand, but still educational. Like you still hit on all the main points that need to be hit on. But when it comes to retirement, like how do we take it from that level of storytelling in the book that you put together to our industry of financial planners and how we communicate it? Like how can our industry do a better job to educate, to communicate to not just younger people, but anybody?
I think I have a pretty good answer to that. If you look at the best financial advisors, the best financial communicators out there, and that group, by the way, has 100% crossover, if you ask me, in the Venn diagram. The best
Yeah.
advisors are really good communicators, and they are the people watching the videos. They are the people on YouTube. How are other people expressing this? You just mentioned some advisors watch your stuff to learn all of that. That's absolutely crucial. You're always stealing ideas. What example did they use? How did they show what path not to go down? How did they communicate? All of that is absolutely vital. If you can mix in a little humor Absolutely, it helps, because at the end of the day, a spoonful of sugar does help the medicine go down. That expression has merit. I think it's a little easier to do with my subject matter, to be honest, than it is with yours. I think yours is even drier to some extent as they get to be that age than mine is. But I think a little humor helps. But really, I think a lot of this is just taking in all the information you can, stealing as much of other people's ideas, and then customizing it for your own delivery style. I mean, one of the things that you do in your videos is you try to be very logical. So you deliver in a very calm fashion, but you can see when you put together the direction you're going to take, the scripts, you've tried to do it in a very logical way. So people go, yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. You're not jumping all over. I think that's very, very important. And remember, a lot of times when you're helping somebody in their 70s or I'm helping my father, et cetera, people are dealing with some cognitive decline to boot. And so you have to take that challenge on, and you're dealing with two people who come at things from different angles if it's a couple. So it can all be quite tricky. But at the end of the day, communication skills are absolutely vital to being a good advisor, or in my case, not an advisor, but an educator.
Yeah. People always comment, Adam, you talk too fast. It's on YouTube. Slow it down. You can control it, right? That's why I love it. It's funny. I watch all my YouTube at 1.5 times. It's just the way my brain works. Like everything's 1.5. And I can hardly watch movies nowadays. We watched one the other day, and I'm like, hey, let's speed this thing up.
I think unfortunately we're all developing ADHD in the screen-oriented world, and it's tough to keep our attention. I mean, I don't know if you saw all the rumors that have hit over the last few months that Hollywood has more or less been instructed because of the two-screen phenomenon to dumb down the plot lines. That if you have these convoluted plot lines, like a lot of the British dramas used to that aired on BritBox, that you're going to lose the viewer. And they're not going to word of mouth it. They're not going to stick with it. That's a sad comment, but it's also the reality of where we are. And so you're trying to go with sound bites and you're trying to do that. But in our industry, you've got to be careful, because if you go too short, you lose the exceptions. You lose the nuances. Like I find doing the 3-minute videos that we often emphasize on Instagram, for example, I find that hard. And Aiden, who works with our group, they're really hard. Like, remember that Mark Twain line, I would have written you a shorter letter, but it takes too long? That's such an important line, because the boiling it down takes so long. And Aiden has given me some subjects and said, you should do something on this. And I've said to him, you can't, because there's too many exceptions to that. There's too many nuances. I can't cover them in 3 minutes. And accidentally, I could push somebody in the wrong direction. And so I've got to pick and choose the subjects that can really be dealt with relatively shortly without, again, screwing people up or forgetting the important exceptions. All of this requires a lot of thought. Like educators, advisors have to take the communication part of this extremely seriously.
Yeah. No, and you do a great job putting your shorts together. That's where social media is a great median. You can do the shorts, you can do the 10 to 15 minute, and you can have the hour-long podcast as well. So everyone's looking for something different. So.
No, in Canada, we're so lucky too. I mean, you look at Ben Felix and what he's done on the investment front with the Rational Minder podcast and other things. Then you look at the Plain Bagel, who I think is phenomenal. And then you look at the success they've had across the border. Like they're two of the bigger players down in the US, and they're Canadian, which I love. I think that's absolutely fantastic. It is good. I mean, we should be proud of the fact that some of the most well-known communicators in the finance and investment space are emanating from Canada.
Yeah. Richard does such a good job in his communication.
Well, his dry humor is classic.
So good.
You know, the other thing is,
right?
and he's very smart. You know what I mean? You can, that shines through. Like, even though he's delivering in a very casual, humble way, when you watch him enough, you go, okay, this guy's very sharp, because he sees the nuances. He sees the different angles. He kind of knows what the objections are going to be and therefore how to handle them. But also, he doesn't ever pretend to have all the answers. He's not out there predicting where markets are going and all these types of things. So I have a lot of respect for both those guys and many others in Canada. Again, we're quite blessed to have a lot of the communicators we do.
Well, even like on your podcast a couple of weeks ago, you had pre-interview you, kind of a reverse role. Like, just, I mean, the highest of quality people, interviewer brains out there that, we have a great resource here in Canada, and a lot of them are online now. It's, I won't
like Preet's always trying to help people. Like, he could have made way more money doing certain things. He's always saying, no, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do this instead. Like, he's an interesting cat, but he's very, very smart and very caring and trying to help. And, you said you didn't want to lump yourself in, but your videos have huge followings. I mean, when you think about the fact that you're basing those on Canadian pre-retirees and retirees, you're not trying to cross borders here, and you're not trying to appeal to all age segments. And then you look at the numbers, like, it's very, very impressive. Did you get started during COVID?
We're a COVID baby. Yeah. We're a COVID baby.
That was great,
I actually started. Well, it's fantastic, right? And we actually started, like, I put together kind of a course first before I jumped onto YouTube, but it was during COVID. At that time we had a bit of a different business model where we were charging our clients kind of an AUM model. So it's like,
Right.
well, our clients are paying us. We need to provide a service. So that's where we started the YouTube stuff. And then in April of 21, it kind of took off for us. So,
No,
but it's
it's
been a
good.
great
It's
medium, and to meet people like you and others, and it's been a great, yeah, it's been fun for sure.
No, and again,
So,
if you're not out there watching all of this and reading all of these different people and stealing from them, you're crazy. Like you've got these
oh,
master communicators in the field, and even if you don't take what they're saying verbatim, you probably shouldn't go that far. You're going to learn the general approach they're taking and think, you know what, I like that, and I can match it up to these two examples from my practice or my personal life, whatever, and weave them
yeah,
together in a more effective manner. And what I've seen that I've really liked is that you have to use spreadsheets and some math, especially in your case, you're doing retirement income planning. But a lot of people also have backed up a little bit and just use conversation and tried to demystify this and take the intimidation out of it. Maybe they blend both. But a lot of times now it's just good, strong communication skills. And I think one of the things that's
yeah,
coming through often, the viewer wants to see somebody who's obviously well informed, but truly empathetic, somebody
yeah,
who
hundred
sees the
percent.
challenges they're going through. I think that's one of the things that pulls people in, an authenticity to the fact that they really do care. They really do relate
Yeah,
to what I'm going through, and they try to push all of that. Like I know when I wrote the home ownership chapter in the update to the book, the last thing I wanted to do was gloss over the challenges of today's arithmetic. Like I wanted to make sure the reader knew, yeah, it is tougher. The down payment part of it in particular is just incredibly
yeah,
challenging to put together,
yeah,
especially in the big cities. So, what are the levers you can pull that at least can help a little bit, but you have to make sacrifices. And frankly, for some people, it may not be possible. And that's not complex economics or complex personal finance. That's basic arithmetic. The income's
yeah.
just not
Basic
there to
reality.
support where they're trying to head. So it's a tough
Yeah,
position. I really do wish we had lower home prices because I think it's
yeah,
better for the economy as a whole, better for society as a whole.
yeah. Was that the toughest chapter to write, or what was the
No
toughest one to
question.
write there?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah,
that by far. I mean, you really do want to make sure you're dealing with the realities, but also, of course, real estate prices vary dramatically across the country. So you have to factor that into the back of your head. What about single people? There are a lot of people getting money from parents, as you know, but then a lot of people can't do that. You have to acknowledge that. And you can't kind of say, get the money from your parents, not recognizing that many, many people can't do that. How do you weave all
yeah,
that in? And again, I think having multiple characters in the barbershop gave me a chance to cover off a lot of different scenarios, and that really
yeah,
did help. I think that approach, I got a little lucky with the Wealthy Barber. I came up with the idea because I thought it would take the intimidation out, move it off the math, make it more conversational. But two other benefits to it, as I mentioned, you've got these multiple characters covering off scenarios, but also the narrator talks openly about how he hates this stuff and is no good at
yeah,
math. And I think a
yeah.
lot of readers go, that's me. And if he can do it, and if he can walk through these lessons and pick up what he needs to know, then I can walk through them with him. I can go on that journey. And then, of course, you've got his sister and you've got all the other characters. And I think that's part of what makes it work.
Exactly. Yeah, and like I said earlier, you did a great interview with Preet. It's on your channel. We'll link it below as well, so people can go back and watch that. But it talks about, like, yeah, how did you start this back in '89? What kind of drove to starting it? You talked about, your mom shipping the original books out
Yeah.
until like, kind of the background. So I didn't want to cover that in this interview because that's out there. We'll link it below. A fantastic interview. I want to finish because you hit me with 10 random questions off the cuff. So I'm going to be kind to you, Dave, and hit you with five. But just
Fire
top
away.
of mind, quick answers here. First one is, you've met and advised thousands of Canadians. So is there a single financial habit or moment you've seen that's completely changed someone's life trajectory, either for the good or bad?
Yeah, I think in many cases, frankly, in fact, interestingly, lately, it's been a lot of people doing spending summaries. I'm embarrassed to admit I was not a big advocate of spending summaries early in my education career. In fact, they were downplayed in the Wealthy Barber. I've gone a 180. I now push them aggressively. And many people after that process, it's jump started their financial planning. It's done some very good things there. But the second one I would choose is in those rare circumstances that I can convince young couples to spend way less on cars, they always come back a few years later and thank me
Yeah.
100% of the time. And that's
Cash
been
for
one that I
cars.
take a lot of pride in because, the cars thing is one of the few things that drives me nuts. I think the two pet peeves I have in personal finance, the amount we spend on cars as a percentage of income, especially younger people, and also people who don't take advantage of the group RRSP match when it's dollar for dollar. Those two
Yeah.
things are really hard to accept. So I think shining a light on those and getting people to alter behavior, yeah, there's been lots of times where you can see people have really had a light bulb moment, made a change, and it's made a huge difference for them.
Yeah, we all want to raise, and then we don't do the matching on our group RSP. Makes no
Yeah,
sense.
none.
Yeah. Second question. What's a belief you held strongly when you originally wrote the original Wealthy Barber that no longer you believe today?
Well, certainly I believed at that time that we could pick the better performing mutual funds, the ones that were actively managed and we thought we could outperform the markets with by doing huge amounts of research. Like I was at the point in those days, I used to actually speak to the managers directly, the Cundles, and John
Yeah.
Templeton answered his phone when I called him once when I first put the Wealthy Barber
Wow.
out. But after 5 and 10 years, and then of course, all the data that's come out since, none of us can do it. I wish we could do it. Like, I mean, there's
Yeah.
been an industry built up around it with Morningstar, Gordon Pape, a wonderful guy in Canada, all these people trying, but none of us have been able to do it, that it's just not
Yeah.
something that's projectable. And so the vast majority of actively managed funds underperform. But as importantly, you can't pick ahead of time the minority that will outperform. And therefore, index funds for most people make the most sense. Not perfect, but they make the most sense.
Yeah. Third question. You've spoken a lot about simplicity in financial planning. What's one overly complicated thing that Canadians obsess about that truly doesn't matter in the long run?
That's an interesting one. You know, I would probably have to go back to my early days of 87 and 88, working with a lot of people as I put the book together. And I would see the incredible budgets a lot of them had, and they couldn't stick to them, much like I made two of the characters in The Wealthy Barber, including Roy, including The Wealthy Barber. So much, by the way, of what you see in The Wealthy Barber, those are just true stories modeled and
Yeah.
put into the mouths of the characters. I've just borrowed from that. But I think a lot of people put huge amounts of work into budgeting. I think you're better to focus your energy on one spending summary a year of 2 to 3 months. And then from that flows out, but maybe an even better answer, all the people out there who try to outperform the markets and they're trying to trade in and out tends to be more males than females. I hate to sound
Hmm.
sexist, but it's true. All the data supports that. And they put
Yeah.
in huge amounts of work. Sometimes they're online 4 and 5 hours a day. They're obsessed at nights and they don't outperform. In fact, most of them blow up. The keep it simple, stupid really does work when it comes to investing. You look at people like my father who completely are detached from all of it, pays no attention whatsoever, and without exaggeration, has probably
Yeah.
outperformed 98% of people. And so I think
Yeah.
we throw a lot of work into following macroeconomic projections and watching those types of videos on YouTube, but nobody's ever able to make accurate enough predictions to harness productively. And so I like
Yeah.
watching that stuff too, but I don't kid myself it's going to help me. I watch it more for entertainment and interest reasons. I don't alter my portfolio construction because of it.
Well, I think it was Fidelity that did this survey, right? And they found the best performers were those that were dead, and
Yeah.
second, that lost their passwords to get into their accounts. So it does
Yeah, I've
show.
never
Just
known if
leave
that's
things
true,
alone.
but they did say it, and certainly it
I'm
matches
gonna
up to my
believe it.
dad. My dad's both
Yeah.
dead and has lost his account, but he's still alive. He's dead and alive. I don't know
Yeah.
how he does it, but he does it.
And he still hasn't paid for dinner yet for you, has he?
Exactly.
Yeah. Fourth one. If Canadians only understood one number on their financial statement or investment report, which number would actually matter the most?
Their savings rate. So I think a
Yeah.
lot of people would say their investment returns, and that matters. There's no doubt about it. And you've got to be very fee sensitive and all the things that you know more than anybody. But I think you've got to have a good savings rate, especially when you're young. And I admit again, it's tougher now with the cost of living. And the real estate costs are getting all the focus, but everything's expensive now. Your home
Yeah.
insurance, your property taxes have risen at a greater than CPI rate in many, many instances. But even when you go to the grocery store, there's no doubt in my mind that the CPI is understated when it comes to food. They're saying something like
Mhm.
25% rise in 5 years. Anybody that's in a store knows it's more than that. So it's tough to
Yeah.
say, but the savings rate is still the single most important variable. You've got to get it to 10 to 15%. It's why what an advantage it is being a member of a defined benefit pension plan, where that's being done right off the top of your paycheck. You're mandated to be involved. You've often got the other entity putting monies in too. And again, it's defined benefit. You don't have the same investment risk that people building up their own portfolio do. That's a nice thing to have.
Yeah. Well, people always, oh, you're lucky you have a DB plan. You know what? I married a nurse. So when I got married, I was 29. Steph was 25 at the time, working full time as a nurse. And I was like, yeah, you're that DB. Lucky you. And then I looked at her paycheck and she was having about $600 a month come off
Right.
for savings. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I don't know any other 25-year-old saving $600 a month for their long-term retirement. So, as much as we can say later on at retirement, oh, lucky you, you work for the government or whatever, you have the DB plan, they also committed upfront with that savings. It's for savings, but so many of us need to kind of create that internally as well, and we just don't.
We do. And also, you make an important point because of all the pension envy out there, where people are actually annoyed with a lot of the people who have defined benefit pensions, but they did contribute on their own. And as I said in the book, I've always argued that even the employer part of the contribution is really the employee because it's all part of your total compensation. And so I think
Absolutely.
you can make a very compelling argument. They're putting all of the monies in, but you're right. The forced savings aspect of it is vital. And plus, they're forced to start young. And of course, they can take advantage, therefore, of the compounding, although with defined benefit, that risk is somewhat alleviated for them. So, yeah, I
Yeah.
still think that starting young, by the way, is absolutely crucial. But a lot of
Mhm.
people take a defeatist attitude. I didn't start young. I can't do much now. At any point in time, there's all kinds of good things you can do.
Yeah. And again, the book highlights that really well. Last question. You've had massive success, obviously, over 2 million copies sold. The first go around, I'm sure this go around will hit that and more. But you've also, like, the pressure living up to the book. So was there ever a moment you felt stuck or burned out or unsure what to do next? Maybe even in the 16 months of writing this copy of the book. How did you work through it? Like, because there's probably a lot of people that are doing stuff like this. It's like they're at the end of their rope. Like, how did you kind of push through that 16 months?
I felt a lot of pressure, interestingly. Like, I'm not a very stressed person. I've always handled stress quite well. I found this hard. Again, being a little bit older, it's isolating when you're writing, but also trying to live up to the original Wealthy Barber. I think, again, I had a moment that really helped me. I was out for a car ride driving between Sarnia and Grand Bend. And I thought, I think the best attitude I can take here is not to try to live up to the Wealthy Barber. It's to try to make the new version better.
Yeah.
I want people to read both and go, I like the new one better. It was a little more thorough, it covered off certain angles better. And once I got that, I thought, okay, that's a tall order, but now I like that attitude better. I like that approach better. And I got back to kind of work. But hey, I mean, when you're a writer, there are days when you want to pull your hair out. I remember I wrote for 3 weeks once, really thought I had the home ownership chapter going the right direction, tested it with a couple people in mixed response, tested it with my own two kids and one of their partners in Florida. They didn't like it. And now all of a sudden you're 0 for 5 and you're going, I thought this was pretty good. And you're back to the
Yeah.
drawing board. Now I'm glad I
Yeah.
did it
Three
because
weeks
it's worked
gone.
out well, but there's 3 weeks gone where you thought
Yeah.
you were on the right track and it just didn't resonate. It didn't test. It didn't capture people. And capture is often the right word when you're writing. You have to hook people. The ultimate goal here with a finance book, or I guess any book, is you want them to really be excited about turning the page. What's next?
Yeah.
What am I going to learn now?
Yeah.
Where is this heading? And, that's not easy to do with finance. And clearly in that effort, I didn't do it because I didn't get that response. You have to start over again. So it's the resilience and kind of the stick-to-itiveness to get it done. Proud I did it. But as I mentioned earlier, don't think I would do it again. I think this is
Yeah.
probably it for me.
So for those of you that don't have the book yet, great Christmas gift. If you're looking for a Christmas gift, stocking stuffer, you have a coworker that thinks they know it all and they don't, get them this book. This is phenomenal. Dave, maybe highlight like where you can pick it up at, and any closing comments from your side.
We did something very unusual. We are going with all Canadian distribution. So we had a Canadian printer, we have Canadian editors, Canadian writer, obviously, but we're only going independent bookstores and Indigo. That's it. So even though Costco and Amazon and Walmart have been great partners in the past and certainly have good feelings towards them, I decided let's go all Canadian. And we, by the way, had made that decision prior to the tariff wars. We just decided to make it a Canadian project. So it's independent bookstores and Indigo. And then at thewealthybarber.com, there's an audio version available, and that's going over well. And just closing comments are thanks for having me. I enjoyed the interview. You asked some very unusual questions, one I hadn't heard before, which is fun. And it's nice to be able to talk about those things. And obviously, I hope people enjoy the book.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll do it again soon. And yeah, again, we'll link everything, Dave's podcast, his interview with Preet, as well as a link to pick up the book. So, Dave, thanks again, and hopefully many people get this in their stocking this year.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Enjoyed it immensely.
Absolutely.